Africa. Good morning, East Africa. Good morning, Tanzania. Good morning, Kampala, Uganda. Good morning, Nairobi, Kenya. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Bujumbura, Burundi. Good morning, DRC, Congo, pamoja na maeneo ya kule Kigali, Rwanda, Mozambiki, Zambia, pamoja na good morning Tanzania kwa ujumla. Good morning South Carolina, Colombia. Good morning Washington DC, ambapo Abdul Shatri yuko kule anatuunganisha katika kipindi chetu cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa, ambacho kinakuja moja kwa moja kutoka katika studio zetu za hapa Colombia, South Carolina, na vilevile kinarushwa katika Swahili Villa Online TV. What a day, what a day. Katika kipindi chetu cha leo cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa, tumewatayarisheni ni marudio tu, marudio ya maongezi au lecture nzuri kwelikweli ambayo ilitolewa na Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu alipohudhuria muhadhara huyu katika niseme University of South Carolina hapa Columbia, South Carolina, katika college inaitwa Darla School of Business, ambayo ni sehemu ya University of South Carolina, ambapo inafundisha international businesses, operation and supply chain, finance na management, pamoja na masuala ya political science katika Darla School of Business. Kama visiting fellow huyu Tundu Lissu alikaribishwa na retired Professor Robert Roof, ambaye sasa hivi ni mzaliwa wa Zambia na amekuwepo katika University of South Carolina akifundisha international businesses and Africans and political affairs kwa kipindi kirefu kwelikweli, na yeye ndiye alikuwa profesa wa kwanza kabla Professor Chris Yenkin ambaye alimkaribisha Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu katika miaka miwili iliyopita, lakini Robert Roof ndio alikuwa wa kwanza kumwalika Tundu Lissu kupitia American Swahili News pamoja na Swahili Villa Online TV. Hebu turudi hapa kidogo. Tumesema nini? Kupitia American Swahili News pamoja na Swahili Villa Online TV. Robert Roof huyu. Na leo libidi niende nikatafute jacket. Good morning Africa, good morning East Africa. Ana shanza kuwa mkubwa kidogo, nabidi tutafute maybe 40S or 42S. This is 42S jacket here. Na labda kidogo inabidi turudi tena gym. Good morning Africa, good morning East Africa. Katika kipindi chetu hiki cha leo cha Good Morning Africa ambacho tumechelewa kidogo kuanza na huko kushapambazuka, ni siku ya Alhamisi nafikiri kama siwezi kukosea. Hebu tuangalia hapa inatuambia nini. Yeah, it's Thursday, July 31st, mwisho wa mwezi huu wa 7 ambao mwaka huu 2025 unakimbia kwelikweli, na tunaelekea katika uchaguzi. Kwanza kabla hatujaanza segment hii ya kwanza ambayo itabidi wa Tanzania msikilize Tundu Lissu. Yupo katika Darla School of Business. Napenda Watanzania wote mnaoifuatilia kipindi chetu cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa, mwende mkaiangalie kwanza, mjue who's Darla. Tutakuja hapa tutamuongelea siku moja Darla ni nani. Aligraduate hapa University of South Carolina, ndio kwa maana hii College of Business ambayo ni sehemu ya University of South Carolina inaitwa Darla. She's a very successful business entrepreneur woman here katika taifa hili kubwa la Marekani. She's a billionaire. Kwa hiyo university yetu inaitwa Darla School of Business. Ukialikwa kama fellow lecturer pale, umepewa heshima kubwa kwelikweli, kama American Swahili News na Swahili Villa Online TV tulivyofanya kwa mara ya kwanza 2021. Tumemwalika kama mara 3 hivi. Mara ya kwanza hii sidhani kama Watanzania wengi walipata nafasi ya kumsikiliza alikuwa ni makamu mwenyekiti na sasa hivi ni mwenyekiti ambaye anashikiliwa na kosa ambalo alilizungumzia vile kosa la aliyekuwa mwenyekiti wa CHADEMA katika kipindi hicho Freeman Mbowe, ambaye alikuwa anakabiliwa na kosa nafikiri ni la kigaidi. Yeye Lissu wamempa la uhaini. What a joke, serikali ya Tanzania. What a joke. Sasa tumlete Robert Rufi kwa sababu tusipoteze muda mwingi sana tukawapoteza. Professor Robert Ruff ameretire sasa hivi. He's a distinguished professor kutoka ni distinguished professor sasa hivi ameretire, ni mzaliwa wa Zambia. Watu wanasema kwa nini ni mzungu, muone anasema ni Mzambia, amezaliwa Zambia, wazazi wake walihamia Zambia long time ago, kabla ta independence ya Zambia. Kwao ni Lusaka, Zambia, lakini alikuwa anafundisha University of South Carolina. Alikuja naye huku South Carolina kijana kweli na akawa profesa. Sasa anamkaribisha Tundu Lissu, tumweke hapa Professor Robert Ruff huyu, tumsikie, tufuatilie hii hotuba ya lecture Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu.
So he talked about how he was arrested from time to time by security forces. Finally, this culminated September 7, 2017, when he was shot 16 times, playing home from Parliament. Miraculously, he survived. He's had 25 surgeries to try to repair the damage. Anyway, he's committed to democracy, and last year he returned to Tanzania, even though it's an extremely dangerous place for him to run against a man that had turned Tanzania into a dictatorship. So basically, now he's living in exile in Belgium, but he continues to work for human rights, for opening up the country, not just politically, but also economically. Not just Tanzania, he's interested in Africa and obviously the whole world. So we're delighted that he can come and talk to us. He'll talk a little bit, but he's also very interested in having your questions. So we'd like to make this back and forth. So, Mr. Lissu, welcome to our class. Thank you all.
Just so that I'm able to speak more freely. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm a Tanzanian. I'm Tanzanian, as Rob would say. Political activist for Tanzania. Been active in Tanzanian politics for many years. I have been part of the democratic struggles in the country since my student days. I have seen inside of police jails and security prisons. The first time I went to prison was Christmas Eve of 2002. So Christmas of 2002, I was in prison, and I had just come back, by the way, from the United States, where I had been for 2 years. So I have gone through quite a few things, shocking if being shot 16 times is not fun. But I have survived, and because I'm alive, I keep on fighting. Because that is what you do when things are as horribly wrong as they have been a long time in my country, in Tanzania. Now, I want to talk to you about not about my trials and tribulations, which we can spend days talking about. I just want to talk to you about constitutional reform and the fight against corruption. If you will, another way of putting it, why democracy is important in the struggle against corruption. My assumption is, and has always been, that corruption thrives most in countries or regimes where there is no democracy, where the government cannot be held accountable either by parliament or through parliamentary means, or where there is no free press, or where the judiciary, the courts are not independent, or where civil society, you and me, are not organized. In other words, where there is democracy, democracy creates the best opportunities for dealing with corruption, with questions of abuse of office, because I think it is fair to say corruption, in essence, is abuse of office, of public trust, of public office. I do not pretend to know Africa. Africa is a continent of 54 countries. I have not visited more than 80% of them. So I cannot talk about the state of corruption in Africa. I would not be telling the truth. So I will talk about corruption and give you some examples from the one place that I know best, my own country of Tanzania. I suspect whatever I have to say about Tanzania will hold true for many other countries in the continent, because our politics, our systems of governance are not that much different. Our histories are more or less common. So when I speak of Tanzania, you can, with some degree, take it that I'm also speaking of Kenya to some extent, or about Angola, or perhaps about Nigeria, or any other typical African country. Now, how many of you know where Tanzania is, or have ever heard about Tanzania? Your hands. We're not doing that, yeah? We are fine. Okay. How many of you have ever heard of Mount Kilimanjaro? Anyone read The Snows of Kilimanjaro by Ernest Hemingway? No? Some of them. Ernest Hemingway won his Nobel in 1954, not because of the snows of Kilimanjaro, but he had a lot of stories to tell about the then Tanganyika. Tanzania was then called Tanganyika. Some of his best writing came from big game hunting in Tanganyika. So Tanzania is the land of Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest peak in Africa. It's the land of Serengeti, perhaps one of the most magnificent nature attractions you can find anywhere in this world. Tanzania is a country of about 60 million people today. It is the largest country in East Africa. It has been independent since 1961 from the British colonial rule. The British colonized pretty much everybody, including America, you may remember. For a long time, Tanzania has not been, and still is not, a democracy. And that is why we have a situation where a leader, a parliamentary leader, could be gunned down 16 times inside a heavily guarded government housing compound, as I was on September 7th, 2017. So we are not a democracy. And because we are not a democracy, we're also a very corrupt, very corrupt system, very corrupt state. It is a country where people in government who hold government offices can steal without any consequences. One of our former presidents who died last year, he was president for 10 years between 1995 and 2005. Benjamin Mkapa wrote memoirs. He published his memoirs just before he died. And in his memoirs, he says somewhere that when he was president, he and his people, the central bank governor, the minister of finance, they connived to steal $100 million from the central bank in order to finance the ruling party's electoral campaigns for 2005. He writes this in his memoirs. And he could only write that in his memoirs, safe in the knowledge that he is completely protected. There will be no consequences. There are no consequences if you are a government official of any consequence. And that's why a former president, would publish a book in which he admits that they're just stealing money left, right, and center. So we're not a democracy. Now, what are the features? What are the constitutional features of an undemocratic state? What is it about Tanzania? If you look at our constitution and our political system, tells you immediately that this is not a democratic state. And what is it about those features, those constitutional features, which permit corruption? An undemocratic state, the first thing that you notice about a typical African post-colonial state, a typical African post-colonial state was a very undemocratic and has been a very undemocratic state. Now, one of its principal features is concentration of powers in the office of the president. Our presidents are what a constitutional scholar from Nigeria has called imperial presidents. They have powers that remind you of absolute monarchies of 17th and 18th century Europe. Their powers are vast and they are unchecked. In the United States, your president does not get to appoint anybody of consequence without going to Senate for confirmation, right? Every presidential appointee is confirmed by Senate. Is that right? I think my constitutional history of the United States tells me that, at least, that presidential appointees must be confirmed by Parliament, by Senate. The President of the United States cannot use any money, cannot use any taxpayer's money without the authority of Congress. Is that right? Yeah. Now, in a typical African state, the president basically appoints, and this is provided for in the Constitution. The president appoints literally everybody. All ministers, all, here you elect your governors, right? And sometimes you even elect your police chiefs. Is that right? So the president appoints all ministers, all governors, and not just governors, county executives, appoints all judges, appoints all heads of government entities like the Electoral Commission or Telecommunication Commission or your Securities and Exchange Commission. They are all appointees of the president. Did I say judges? All judges, all registrars of all courts, all chief executive officers of companies or corporations or other institutions owned by the government. The president appoints the military chiefs, all of them. All right. So the Tanzanian president, and by Tanzanian president, read a typical African president, is a very powerful person indeed. And all of these appointments are without any parliamentary oversight. Any. No parliamentary confirmation like you have here. And because the president appoints everybody of consequence, of any consequence, these appointees of the president are all the president's men and women. They are accountable to the president and the president alone. The president can dissolve parliament. In fact, he appoints a certain number of parliamentarians. In Tanzania, 10 members of parliament. So if one speaks of a view of Congress here is congressmen and women are elected, right? In Tanzania, a certain number of them are appointed by the president. Now you can imagine if he or she appoints them, who do they serve when they sit in Congress? Do they serve the people? Or do they serve the president? You have a constitution which says that in money matters, Parliament shall not debate any proposal or motion or bill on money matters unless and until that motion or bill or matter is first approved by the president and tendered in parliament by the minister, and the minister is appointed by the president. In other words, in matters of public finance is also controlled by the president. So if he decides that no one is going to read the country's national budget this year, no one will. Because the president, any debate over money matters, money bill must be approved by the president. The president has power to dissolve parliament. Under what circumstances? If parliament, for some reason, disagrees with the piece of legislation sent by the president, then he can dissolve parliament. In other words, you are supposed to pass the laws that the president wants. So I have concentration of powers. Number two, the second feature of this democratic constitutional system systems is the impunity. The impunity within which those vast powers are exercised. There's been a lot of debate here about what to do with Donald Trump, right? After all what happened. There's been a lot of debate about prosecuting him in the courts. Is that right? In Tanzania, the president is effectively above the law. He cannot be prosecuted for anything he does or refuses to do or ignores to do while he's in office. And that's why President Papa could write in his memoirs that he and his fellow crooks stole $100 million and get away with it. So the president enjoys the kind of protection against criminal prosecution that reminds you of, like I say, of 17th and 18th century constitutional monarchs of absolute monarchies of Europe. He's beyond control. He cannot be controlled by parliament. He cannot be taken to court. He controls the instruments of violence. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed services. The exercise of his powers is uncontrolled. The president exercises powers in other spheres as well. In Tanzania, our land law starts by declaring that all lands in Tanzania are public lands at the control and disposition of the president. If you look at our mining law says all minerals in Tanzania are public property at the control and disposition of the president. If you look at our oil and gas law, it says all gas and oil resources of the United Republic are held in trust by the president on behalf of the people of Tanzania. So, this fellow who appoints everyone of consequence, who cannot be held accountable, also controls our resources. You get a point? Do you know what holding property in trust means? A trustee in law. I forgot to tell you I'm a lawyer, so forgive me. If your property is held in trust, is held on your behalf, the person who holds that property in trust on your behalf legally is the owner of the property. He can or she can sell the property or do whatever he wants to do with it, provided, the law says, provided he does it on your behalf or for your interest. So the president, by being a trustee of all the natural resources and the land and the animals and the forests and everything in Tanzania, is effectively the owner of those resources. And so that is the constitutional and political system that has obtained in Tanzania since 1962. We got independence in 1961. We were a parliamentary democracy. The president, we did not have a president. The president came with the Republican Constitution a year later, a year after independence. So this Leviathan was created in 1962. And that is the case today. Now, how does that relate to corruption? When when you have a public official who wields that kind of power, you can only imagine what they can do with it. Power, they say power corrupts, yeah? And if power corrupts, what about absolute power? It corrupts absolutely. So we have had a system which has allowed our public officials, starting with the president, all the way down, which is made sure that these officials exercise powers without any control. And the results have been disastrous. So we have had cases in Tanzania. We have had cases in Tanzania. Mkapa stealing from the bank of Tanzania when he was president is just one example. We have many examples of theft, theft on a grand scale, being organized from State House. Our White House, it is white. You know our presidential palace. We don't call it the White House, even though it is white. But our State House has been what our first president actually described it once, a den of thieves and crooks. It has been a den of thieves and crooks because of this constitutional and political system in which the president is largely above the law. So for a country like Tanzania, in recent years, there has been a lot of investment from abroad. Tanzania, from around 1995 to 2015, Tanzania was the #1 foreign direct investment destination in the mining sector. We attracted more money in mining than any other African country, including South Africa, which has always been big on mining. So there's been a huge amount of money into mining. We have, beginning around 2000, we have attracted massive amounts of foreign direct investment in oil and gas exploration. Some of the biggest names in oil and gas in this country, ExxonMobil, you name them, have been operating in Tanzania. And you can never get to know how these companies operate because the contracts that they enter with the government are some of the most closely guarded secrets in the country. But still, we have been able to, get some of these contracts and production sharing agreements in oil and gas. And the story that they tell is a story of the country sold to investors and of possibly billions of dollars spent bribing government officials. We have cases which a few years ago, one major case was actually investigated by the Serious Fraud Office of the United Kingdom, in which the former Attorney General was found to have almost $600 million in bank accounts in places like Guernsey, like the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and so on and so on. It is that way because of the way the constitutional system is organized. Now, I want to finish on a slightly brighter note. I even myself get tired of telling this doom and gloom. We have struggled and we continue to struggle to change the country, to change our constitution and our politics, to create a system which allows citizens, which allows our elected representatives to control.
Okay. Tunasimama hapo kwa sababu tumekwenda zaidi ya dakika 30, ni karibia saa nzima. Hii lecture ilitoa Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu kama mnavyoona, ilikuwa ni mwezi wa 8 tarehe 24 nafikiri, tarehe 24 mwezi wa 8 mwaka 2021, 4 years ago. Na mambo yote aliyozungumza Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu katika lecture yake au hiyo session, ilikuwa ni session yake ya pili, yanatokea sasa hivi na amemtokea yeye. Yalimtokea Mheshimiwa Freeman Aikael Mbowe na sasa hivi ndio yeye ndio ni mwanga. Mambo yote aliyoyaongea katika kipindi hicho ambapo alikuwa hapo darasani akitoa hiyo lecture yake ya pili, na lecture yake ya kwanza vile tunayo. Lecture yake ya kwanza tunayo, tutairusha hapa muisikie. Ilizungumzia mambo yaliyofanyika wakati wa Magufuli na mambo yanayoendelea sasa hivi, ambayo yanafanyika dhidi ya yeye Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu kuwekwa ndani kwa kuwepo na mfumo ambao uko corrupt. Hakuna credibility, hakuna transparency, hakuna uwajibikaji, na hakuna mfumo ambao unaongozwa na hii kitu kinaitwa rais au taasisi ambayo inaitwa Ikulu au State House. Na amezungumzia kwamba hakuna democracy na bado wanaendelea, hiyo ni 2021, wataendelea kupigania reform katika katiba na katika masuala ya uchaguzi katika nchi yetu ya Tanzania, kwa sababu legislatures au wabunge ambao wanachaguliwa na wengi wao kutoka Chama cha Mapinduzi na hivi vyama vingine ambavyo vimewekwa, haviendi bungeni kwenda kuzungumzia matatizo yote aliyokuwa akiyaongelea Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu. Kwa hiyo basi tunamalizia hiki kipindi cha leo. Kwa wale ambao mnataka kuisikiliza yote hii lecture yake, tutaimalizia kesho katika kipindi chetu cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa. Msikilize huyu kiongozi wa chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo, CHADEMA, huyu mwenyekiti ambaye wamemfungulia hii kesi ya kubumba, Waswahili wanasema ya uhaini. Ni kwa sababu tu ya potential yake ambayo anao uwezo wa kuiongoza nchi ya Tanzania na kuirudisha katika mstari, na angalau kizazi, labda kizazi kimoja au viwili baadaye, vinaweza kuja kuona maendeleo ya ukweli ya kila mwananchi Tanzania, sio kujengewa reli, kununuliwa mabasi ya mwendo kasi na kununuliwa mandege ambayo Watanzania hawawezi kabisa kupanda hizo ndege. Hata hiyo SGR yenyewe ni Watanzania wachache kweli ambao watakuwa na uwezo wa kuitumia hiyo SGR. Kwa hiyo basi tunamalizia kipindi chetu cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa. Kwa hiyo kesho tunakwenda kumalizia, tumekwenda nusu ya lecture yake. Kesho tutaimalizia lecture yake. Tunasema tu free Tundu Lissu now, democracy now in Tanzania, free Tundu Lissu. Kwa wale ambao bado msubscribe, nendeni mkasubscribe, mshare pamoja na kulike video zetu. Tanzania ni nchi moja. Tusambaze upendo, tupendane, turudi mezani, tukae, to reconcile na tuyamalize haya masuala yanayoendelea katika nchi yetu ya Tanzania. Peace.